We're here at the COP25 in Madrid with Wolfgang Muller, and he is the head of the European Institute for Climate and Energy, EIKE. It's Germany's leading think tank on climate and energy policy. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Absolutely. And so you guys have been doing a lot of important work in the field of climate, in the field of energy. You helped host an event here in Madrid, the Climate Reality Conference. You had one in Munich that I want to get into. So to start with, I want to kind of talk about the science. I know that's one of the things you guys focus on. Everybody here at this conference says the science is so settled, everybody agrees, there's nothing more to do except adopt all these programs that they want. Is that the reality about the science?
I mean, the nice thing about science is not about consensus, If there is a consensus, people say, then it's no science, And at the moment, people say, okay, the majority and so on. We all know it's about you have a theory, you want to prove it, you test it, and you can prove it or don't. And it's not a majority vote. It's not a democratic process. And also the interesting thing is when people even say, okay, but the science is settled, all the debate is lost. From our side, people say sometimes the debate is lost. We said, no, there wasn't a debate. To this day, there is no debate. We ask, the mainstream side to come for a debate, but to avoid it at all costs.
Why do you think that is? I mean, do you have any sense of why they don't want to debate? I know you guys tried to have your conference in Munich, and protesters showed up with bullhorns, started shouting and screaming and threatening the hotel not to have it. Why is it that they're so passionate about making sure that there can't be a debate between the different sides?
I mean, actually there is more than just one reason. Talk particularly about Germany. Germany is a country where the classic religions don't matter much. So many years ago, actually, one could really see, not just now with the climate thing, that environmentalism became our new religion. And like every religion, you have your dogma, which is not supposed to be questioned. And of course, the moment you question a dogma, it's heresy. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the other side, the mainstream side thinks every kind of protest against us is legitimate. And the other side is there's so much money in it. I mean, just think about it, even how Al Gore tried to make his millions or maybe even billions, with trading air. And it's quite interesting if you see really, it's an alliance which is not necessarily orchestrated. You have, I would say, the useful idiots who, the Malthusian and the Ehrlichs, who really think that the Earth can't support X number of people, and therefore we not just have to repent, we have to reduce mankind. I mean, this is, and here with the UN, it's really tricky. The UN is anyway a particular organization. I don't want to criticize the existence of the UN, but if you just see that the majority of member states of the United Nations are not democratic countries. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk to a large extent of dictators or people where you really have to question why are they for 30 years in power, democratically elected. Anyway, and these are the people who are not just heading human rights commissions, but also play a role here. And that is also, you think, okay, the majority of the countries want. But did you ever ask the people? And if you ever ask the people, actually, sure, if you brainwash them with propaganda, starting in the kindergarten, continuing in school, and then in high school, and of course goes on in university. I mean, not even to think about corporate social responsibility. And what is this? It's like to follow the trend of the day, to look good.
And so what is the current state of the science? I know at the event here that you guys put on, you had a lot of scientists. I mean, some of the best known, really prestigious scientists around. Dr. William Happer was there. What is the other side? Because, a lot of viewers of our stuff, they understand that there is another side to this debate, but, people who maybe only watch CNN or only read The Guardian don't even realize that there's another side. So what is the other side saying? Is the hypothesis that man's emissions of CO2 is going to heat the planet and we're in an emergency, is that a legitimate hypothesis? Is it proven? Are we really in big trouble? What's the reality?
I mean, the nice thing we could say is that there is no crisis, there is no climate emergency. There is therefore actually no need to take drastic measures. But to be more specific, we can really say, and this sounds actually for somebody who's just using CNN and others as a news information, incredible. Basically, almost everything we hear about climate in the mainstream media is true. Almost nothing is true. And so number one, take the dying corals of the Great Barrier Reef. If we really speak with the marine, biologist who does empirical study there, you will not find many, because most of these marine biologists sit in front of the computers and do models. And you can say the same about sea level rise. I mean, sea level rise, sure, sea level rises, but also sometimes it does not rise. Sometimes even the trend goes the other way. So it's a complicated issue there. And same actually now with, getting malaria into Europe, Sorry, I mean, we had malaria at the beginning of the 20th century in southern part of Europe, so we got rid of it. It's not because suddenly we managed climate change in the 1920s and 30s. It was just basically fighting malaria by drying the swamps and other matters. But to the key question is, I mean, do we have a climate crisis? Number one, okay, there are extreme weather events. There always were and there always will be. But the point is, how is a trend? And this actually, even if you read the IPCC reports, they don't even support this claim, that we have more extreme weather events. So the interesting part is that the drama comes to some extent among the assessment reports on the IPCC. Then it gets a bit, louder, more dramatic in the summary for policymakers. Okay, the summary for policymakers is then read, maybe read or partly read by journalists, and they make a proper drama out of it. And then, of course, who understands the news is the second story. So what I want to say, we don't have a crisis. And when people say, okay, but CO2 and global warming or climate change, there is no proper correlation between changes of CO2 level and climate. And if there is a correlation, we can see that CO2 follows the temperature change. So, and there are other factors actually, because the question, what drives the climate, is not a new one. It's not the UN invented it. I mean, since people observe weather and the climate, they wonder what is driving weather and what is driving climate. And there are very strong correlations, or much better correlations with changes of solar activity, cosmic rays, the changes of the magnetic field, and sometimes even volcanic activities. I mean, there are things where we pinpoint, we can say, here, this was a much better driver, if you just look at correlations. I mean, climate, we have to know, this is an open fact. Climate is an open, non-linear, chaotic system. So the feedback, they talk about feedbacks, these are made up figures. I mean, the feedback rate of CO2, it's more a guess. The point is, to this day, 2019, nobody was able to prove how CO2 is actually warming the climate. And I mean, this is the main hypothesis. We are here in Madrid for the 25th time in a UN meeting, and there are actually many other meetings in between we don't even, report about. And here in this meeting, we all start from the premise, the UN starts from the premise that we have to reduce CO2 emissions in a significant manner, go even carbon-free by 2050. The science does not support it. I mean, the interesting thing is, if you look at who on the science side is supporting the alarmism, it's mainly people who have an interest. I mean, if it's a professor who needs more research money, a professor who needs more money for a giant computer to calculate climate models. By the way, climate models to this day are not able to reconstruct the climate.
Yeah, not even in the past, much less in the future.
Yes, exactly. So in plain engineering English, it's like the climate models are not calibrated. Mm-hmm. So with as I said, with the existing data from the past, we can't reconstruct the climate, which they should. Therefore, it's actually sheer idiocy to believe that they can predict anything in the future. I mean, models are important. I mean, in finance, in other areas as well, because the future is uncertain. But the models we use here, or the models that are presented and used to support the UN claim and claim by the Paris Agreement, or what other countries use as a justification for climate policies, these models are not worth a name.
So you sound very rational and calm and composed, and we've interviewed for the New American dozens of scientists who've said very similar things to you. And I think in America it's having an impact. We elected a president, for crying out loud, who says the man-made global warming theory is a hoax and that it's to benefit the Chinese. But I know the situation is not that way in Germany. I heard recently from a young German girl, Naomi, said that when she started speaking out about these issues, she was threatened with gang rape by Antifa. And I understand what happened with your organization in Munich. You had protesters show up at this hotel. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in Germany. What is the feeling among the public? What do you see in the media? And why is it like this?
I mean, why it is like this is, again, hard to really come with one explanation. I mean, as I said, Germany is a country where environmentalism is our religion, at least for a large part of society. Then it sounds like a joke, but it was politically decided that we have man-made global warming, about 15 years ago. If you just look when suddenly, like, politicians decided, okay, we have man-made global warming. And how is the situation? To question the premise that climate change is driven by human CO2 emissions, with this actually you lose friends, you lose credibility with most people, and of course you, on the other side, if you sing the tune, you get support, you get funding. For example, one of the protesting groups against our event in Munich was a charitable organization which gets tax money from the city of Munich. It's called the Umweltinstitut, the Institute for the Environment. But they're activists. And I mean, of course, they are not in science. We are heavily relying on science. Our conferences are science conferences. And as I said, I mean, we deal with sea level rise. I mean, basically, everything where we think the climate is destroying the world, we just check the facts. And the facts actually don't prove the alarmists right. So the situation in Germany is, unfortunately, the trend is still so that it's getting worse. I mean, the moment you speak out, I mean, look, our conference, I mean, the hotel kicked us out. It took me a week, to find a completely different, independent venue. And we talk about, in total, we had 10 days, to find a new venue. And then in the end, we were with 250 people at a completely different location. I had to keep it secret so that ANTIFA couldn't sabotage it in the night. And so we managed. And so we had a science conference for 2 days with police protection, which is, sorry, this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
And I mean, some people say Germany is a country of science. I mean, yeah, some science, yes, but I mean, it has to be the right science. It has to be politically correct science. And what is interesting, in the United States, you have the advantage that you have think tanks who for much longer time and with much more support, financial support, could bring information into the public, to the policymakers. I mean, in that case, I really have to mention the Hartlet Institute, which really, under the leadership of Joe Bass, really started to go heavily, in distributing science-based information. I mean, really, you would say, not so fun literature, for the policymakers, not just on the national level, but also on the state level. I mean, hundreds of thousands of books were published. I mean, really, thanks to the great donors there. I mean, we in Germany, we started 13 years ago, EIKE. And okay, now we're in the process where people realize, okay, maybe we should do something to fight the madness. But I mean, it doesn't go on its own. It's just with some volunteers. You can't win basically a war and battles where the other side has, in practice, unlimited resources.
And state funding too, and they use the term denier in the United States a lot to describe people. CNN and these, they say climate deniers, but in Germany it has kind of a special sting to it. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of the nasty terms they use to describe people who don't believe, and the general atmosphere?
I mean, it's definitely the moment people realize that you don't support the mainstream thing that climate change is man-made. You're seen as a denier, and then basically, which is of course an idiotic statement, because none of us denies that the climate is changing. The climate was always changing. I mean, there is no planet with a stable climate, maybe on the moon or so. I mean, no, it's not even a planet, sorry. But to be specific, in Germany, the moment you noticed, people realized you don't believe the mainstream, you're an outcast even within the family. It's basically like it goes with conspiracy theory, and I mean, tick the box, which idiotic conspiracy or credible conspiracy theory you want to believe. we are pushed in this corner, and it is, the stigma is so strong that basically nobody wants to associate with us. I mean, nobody, I'm generalizing, nobody, a large part. And somebody wants to have a political career, can't do. I mean, business people don't want to be seen supporting us, you know. And we don't know about corporate, but I mean, just people are afraid of the stigma, that they lose business partners.
It almost reminds me of Lysenkoism in the Soviet Union. You don't support the official ideology of the science of the state, then you get in big problems. You guys also in Germany have a lot more experience, I think, than Americans on this whole green energy thing. You know, we've had a lot of that going on in America with Congress funding windmills and solar panels and so on. But I think you guys in Germany are really on the front lines, along with Spain, where we are right now. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know you guys focus on energy policy, what is the energy situation in Germany? Have the windmills and the solar panels now taken over, and they're cheap and affordable and powering German industry, or what's the situation?
That's a good one. Powering German industries, I like this. Okay, if you just look at the figures, which about a bit more than 30% of our electricity generation comes from so-called renewable sources, and it's mainly wind and solar and some biomass. And so, you know, how did we end up there? Because with very preferential feed-in tariffs, and of course with utilities that are forced to buy power from so-called renewable sources with a priority. This means in practice, so if the wind blows and the sun shines, you get wind and solar electricity, it has priority in the grid. So all the traditional generators, whether it's nuclear or coal, they have to scale down. So basically on a typical situation, it's like have a sunny day, a sunny Sunday, where there's not much industry demanding energy, and we don't use much air conditioning, and it's a time when nobody needs actually, or not many people need electricity. So we have, let's say, 80 terawatt, and we don't know what to do with it. So we export it, you know, at a negative price, and all we ask in particular wind farms, you know, to go off. And we
turn off the windmills.
Turn off the windmills, and we pay them, we compensate them for not generating wind. Anyway, so, but this sounds also negative. So the positive thing is that, I mean, there is one positive thing, the peak prices for electricity, which usually it was about 12 o'clock when people were cooking, you know, their meals and so on. Okay, this came down, you know, when we had these peak prices, so that companies, in particular Swiss power plants, were basically to some extent living on selling peak power for a serious premium to Germany, they struggle a bit. But the rest, which is not told, is that these sources are so unreliable because of their intermittency. And it's not just that during the week we don't really know whether on Wednesday there will be enough wind. But it's also that in winter, in Germany, we don't have much wind, and of course not much sun either. Mm-hmm. So it's also in general we don't have much enough generation power to produce electricity. So now people say, okay, look, Wolfgang, if now 30% is already wind and solar, why don't we just triple the numbers of wind farms and solar installations, photovoltaic installations? Sounds sensible, but the thing is, we still have days where there's no wind, at least no significant wind, where even if we have 3 times the generation capacity, we still need backup. So the thing is, what we have now in Germany, we have, let's say, everything double. We have still the power plants running, mainly coal-based, and a few nuclear plants. The nuclear plant, which is a different story, Germany decided to go off nuclear by 2022. I mean, because of Fukushima. I mean, of course, you know, you can ask yourself, what has Fukushima to do with German power plants who are based on a river in seismic, not so active areas? Anyway, that's a different story. So what there is this decision to phase out nuclear. So somebody has to generate the power. Okay, for the time being, it's mainly coal. So that's the interesting part, is that the German CO2 emissions did not go down significantly. And then people say, oh no, Germany, well, it's not bad, it's reduced. That's correct. Remember that we had unification with the East Communist East Germany, which is such a backward industry, where when we basically switched off the polluting industry in East Germany, we kind of decarbonized to some extent. And we, in a way, living a bit from this. So this is what the credits we can take up to this day. But right now, in order to increase the percentage of so-called green power to the in the electricity generation, we have to have still backup. As I said, even if we have 4 times the number of photovoltaic installations and wind farms, we still have to have the backup. And Germany is part of the European energy grid, even when energy policy is a national issue, but we still have agreements with neighboring countries, particularly in winter when it's cold. France is important electricity. They have nuclear, but I mean in winter they need extra power because they heat with electric heatings. So where should the power now come from? You know, and
Russia maybe.
That's actually a good point. Yeah. So the backup power plants, if they are built, they're then usually gas powered, and we buy our gas mainly from Russia. And okay. In the past, one has to be fair, in the past the Soviet Union never used against the West the energy supply as a bullying tool. I mean, one has to say this. I mean, it's because we are dependent. Okay, we become dependent, but at the same time we have in Europe now a number of LNG terminals. So in case something goes wrong when there is a supply from the West, from the East, from Russia, one could divert. But it's a cost issue mainly at the moment. But back to when people talk, particularly in the United States, that Germany is a role model in how to go green, how to decarbonize and have electric energy with wind and solar, which is so environmentally friendly. Yes, it comes at a price. Because, and I guess you don't even know your own electricity price, what you pay per kilowatt hour in the United States, for most people it does not matter. Okay, but in US cents, people in Germany pay 34 euro cents per kilowatt hour, which is a significant part. So the Energiewende, this energy transformation, the decarbonizing of electricity generation, is triggering or causing so-called energy poverty. So we have now every year hundreds of thousands of people where energy is cut off, when they really then cut off.
So Germans in their home don't have electricity anymore.
Yes, there is a number of people who gets cut off.
Wow.
And sure, I mean, now you can say, okay, they are not good in their finances. Be it that some people are not very good in managing their finances, but nevertheless, it contributes, when you basically now pay in prices from 20 years ago. I don't want to say, when you pay basically not just 20%, when you pay 100% more, as it would have been the case without the Energiewende.
So who are the big, so there's obviously some losers. Who are some of the other losers? Is this costing industry a lot? Or are industries going to other countries to deal with the rising cost of power? And who are the big winners? I mean, somebody must be benefiting from this. Somebody's got to be making money. Who are the winners and who are the losers?
I mean, the losers are definitely the consumers. Mm-hmm. The consumers, because they pay not just through their higher electricity prices, which electricity prices are a significant part, energy prices in general are a significant part of their household expenses, but it's also energy-intensive industries, which long ago, stopped investing in Germany. I mean, sure, when you're an aluminium smelter, you try to go to a place where the electricity is dirt cheap. Yeah. But but for example, you go to Iceland or so. And but still, there are some companies who use German engineering in the positive sense. I don't mean it as a joke. We need to try, for the industry, erratic power supply. I mean, what the normal population doesn't even know. We already have load shedding, where companies announce or unannounced, are basically cut off from electricity. I mean, the heavy users in particular, in order to stabilize the grid.
Wow.
I mean, in the past, when we had the traditional power generation, the timetables for the power plants were certain, or reliable, like Thanksgiving or so. At that day, we need so much power. And there were, let's say, on average, 12 times a year one had to intervene in the timetable of the power plants, which is not much, I would say. Now we have 2,000 a year, because of the erratic power supply from wind and solar. I mean, sure, you can say with modern computing technology you can deal with it to some extent, but still, we are an industrialized country. When industry relies on reliable electricity supply. And I give you one figure. Before the energy transition, the reliability of the electricity supply in Germany, the reliability of the grid was 99.999999, this is 7 nines behind the comma, certain. So you can say it's almost 100%. And now, I mean, what does it mean? Today we are a bit over 99%. Okay, you came here by plane. If you would you board a plane when they say this airline is 99% safe?
Probably not, no.
Okay, and this is what we now do with our grid.
Wow.
And this is actually, which just goes unnoticed. This is a non-issue. I mean, what the dilemma, I mean, the situation in Germany. You asked me before, how is the situation in Germany? It is a religion to save the climate. And like in a religion, you don't need experts in a particular field. And so the last commission, the so-called coal commission, which was there to decide how we, or when we phase out the use of coal-fired power plants. In this group, there were no energy experts. And this seems to be like a pattern now in Germany that expertise is, I mean, technical expertise is not really wanted.
Political expertise is more important, huh?
You can say that again, yes.
So speaking of the political sphere, the European Parliament just recently declared a climate emergency, and I should put Parliament in quotes. It's not a parliament in the sense that Americans traditionally understand a legislature, but they declared a climate emergency. And I heard some German politicians speaking out and saying, like, hey, maybe we need to cool it with this kind of rhetoric. We've seen this before in Germany when they declare emergency to usurp all kinds of really totalitarian powers. Is that a real risk? I mean, if these climate activists, if the UN, if all these governments get their goal, is it a risk that we could start seeing government really getting out of control and doing things that really jeopardize liberty and prosperity and the well-being of the population?
I'm usually an optimist, but I mean, declaring climate emergency is one of the indicators that we really have to worry, seriously worry. And look, I mean, what we could even see before the declaration of climate emergencies, that banks, World Bank, declared, okay, we don't want to finance anymore like these carbon investments. That basically investments into oil or coal extraction won't take place. So, okay, you have an industry that is shunned. I don't want to now talk about industries, but it's just like, okay, it's now okay following just the dogma and therefore sing the tune, okay, we save the climate. Okay, and the climate emergency means that every political activity is now, considered every political decision has to take place under the consideration, what does it mean for the climate? I mean, the city of Berlin now wants to declare climate emergency. Oh no, they declared climate emergency. I mean, the city of Berlin, I mean, as great as the city is to live in, it's one of the probably worst managed cities in Germany. Oh, wow. I mean, still a very livable city worth to live in, but okay, they declare now climate emergency. A city where everything takes for ages. Okay, so there we can say, okay, don't have to worry much. But what does it mean? So even the decision will take even much longer. Or in other cases, so we have this, and I gave this example with how we do the energy transformation on the electricity grid, the electric power generation, which in the end means higher costs and less reliability. So if we now extrapolate this, and said, okay, now climate emergency, any decision the city government takes or the province wants to take, okay, Berlin is actually a province also, what does it mean? I mean, in the end, like saving the climate, one can't save the climate, And what is climate? I mean, climate is a statistic construct. I mean, what is the global mean temperature? I mean, 14 point something degrees Celsius. So, like, what does it mean? If we go now out there, okay, in the evening it's cold, during the day it's warm. It is a different story. So we could talk about that alone for probably an hour or so. But You ask me?
So is it a risk now with this declaration of climate emergency that government's going to start usurping? You know, in America, we've always been very passionate about like limited government, right? Our Constitution is specifically designed to restrict the sphere of what government can intervene in. But if there's an emergency, I mean, if there's a war or if there's some kind of national emergency or international emergency, is it a risk that maybe government starts going into areas where it shouldn't? You know, a lot of the people here, for example, in this conference are talking about radical population control. We need to really rapidly reduce the number of people. Is it a risk that governments go overboard and really start behaving in a totalitarian or a dangerous fashion that jeopardizes the well-being of people?
Yes, the declaration of climate emergencies or the emergency is a very, very serious point. Particularly in Germany, we had a conference a couple of years ago where leading persons, of the academia mentioned the point that democracy is not able to deal with a crisis of this magnitude. So which way do we go? For the commissars take place?
Climate dictator, maybe.
Yeah, the climate dictatorship. I mean, when people, even then, politicians say, yes, no, we mustn't now talk about the costs, there's much more at stake. So, yes, there is definitely, greater acceptance to totalitarianism. It's a dicey statement, I know, but we have small indicators, for example, what is accepted. So-called climate activists who now for years, do basically something like sabotage in the coal mining area, in an open pit lignite mining in Germany. For years they go there, protest by the hundreds, and the police, is a German practice, they de-escalate. So then you have a few hundred people stopping power generation for hours or maybe a day, and then one or two or maybe three people are arrested and 5 people to take their personal details. So I don't want to say one has to escalate here, but these people break the law, And this is private property where they go there. They sabotage basically the power generation. And what is funny that these power plants in particular there, they use the waste heat to heat other homes. So hundreds of thousands of people rely actually on the heat, district heat, they get from these power plants, which is very common in Germany. We have millions of households who rely basically on the heat that power plants actually sell them. And so the moment we said, okay, switch them off, like even here, when you go around here at the end and then they leave them in the ground and switch now, and okay, where should the power come from? This is a question which doesn't resonate with anybody, I have the feeling.
Excellent. And so any final words of wisdom for people? I mean, if you could control the outcome of this COP25, what would you do? What do you want to tell Americans about what's happening here, about what's happening in Europe, around the world? And what are your thoughts on where it should all go?
I mean, number one, I have to congratulate the United States that they managed to pull out of the Paris Agreement. And by doing this, one showed the world, okay, we don't buy into this. And which is a very strong statement. And what the Americans really can take home is like, look also in the science. Okay, science is not everybody's cup of tea. But, and even look on both sides, Look at what people like us, who really come up also with Heartland, CFAC, their organization where on their website you can look up a lot of information, or in German the Global Warming Policy, in UK the Global Warming Policy Foundation, so all material in English. And there is pressing evidence that there is no climate crisis. And what people really can take home, don't buy into it, don't support it, but at the same time don't polarize. Talk with the other side. And this is actually what I want to direct to, this is on the mainstream side. I mean, they should take a step back and just look how they treat people they don't agree with.
Yeah.
And the outcome of the COP, it would be great if we would really talk about the real issues we have in the world. I mean, we really have serious issues. I mean, still, people die of malaria, people die of waterborne diseases, people die because of in-house smoke, because they don't have to have clean power, and they cook on an open fire in their home. And I mean, the UN, all these nations, I mean, a minority are democratic countries, a minority are countries where human rights are really respected. So, I mean, when people talk about climate refugees, I mean, I don't want to make fun about anybody who is leaving his country to go somewhere else, because that's not a normal thing to do. It's not pleasant. So you go there because you think you have to. And we should really look into the real reasons why people go. And one of the dangers we have to avoid is to accept refugees now just as climate refugees. So we just basically have to turn the knob, less CO2, less global warming, climate change, and suddenly all the people stay at home. And so we really should look into it. I mean, we really have to see, why do people leave? It's a political issue. I mean, as long as we hold these dictators, cronies in these countries, the power, as long as we support them, we are also the culprits.
Well, Wolfgang, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for speaking the truth as you see it. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Alex.